Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Tonight I'll be reading you a collection of Reddit stories while Minecraft runs quietly in the background. These stories are here to help you unwind, relax, and let your thoughts drift as the night settles in. Whether you're getting ready to fall asleep, or just want something calm to listen to, this is your safe space to slow down. So grab a cozy spot, take a deep breath, and let's begin tonight's stories. She stole my best friend. It still stings to think about it. I had a best friend named Marcus since middle school. We did everything together: sports, video games, late-night talks when life felt too heavy. He was the kind of guy who'd show up at my house at midnight if I sent a text saying I was struggling. But then my girlfriend at the time, Claire, entered the picture. At first, everything seemed fine. They got along, laughed at the same dumb jokes, and I thought it was nice that two important people in my life clicked. But slowly, I started noticing small things. When we were all hanging out, Claire would lean closer to Marcus than to me. They had inside jokes that I wasn't part of. If I was telling a story, she'd glance at him, waiting for his reaction. I brushed it off as paranoia. I didn't want to be that guy who got jealous for no reason. Still, the unease sat in the back of my mind like a splinter I couldn't pull out. One night, Marcus bailed on our usual Friday hangout. He texted that he was busy. Later that evening, I saw Claire's location on Snap Maps. She was at Marcus's apartment. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that maybe she needed his advice on something, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I confronted Claire gently. I asked if she had been at Marcus's place. She hesitated, then admitted she had. "We were just talking," she said quickly. "You're overthinking." I wanted so badly to believe her, but her voice cracked on the last word. For weeks, I ignored the red flags. Claire started canceling dates, saying she was tired, only for me to find out later she had been with Marcus. When I confronted Marcus, he laughed it off. "Bro, seriously? You think I'd go after your girl?" That should have reassured me, but the laughter felt hollow, rehearsed. It all came crashing down when I walked into a cafe one afternoon and saw them sitting at the back, holding hands across the table. They froze when they saw me. I didn't even cause a scene. I just turned and walked out. Marcus called after me, but I couldn't face him. I felt like my chest had caved in. Losing a girlfriend was one thing. Losing my best friend, the person I trusted most, was a whole different kind of heartbreak. In the days that followed, I blocked them both. They tried reaching out, texts, calls, even Marcus showing up at my door, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. I realized that trust, once shattered, doesn't just magically rebuild itself. I mourned the friendship more than the relationship. Relationships come and go, but a decade-long bond? That's something you never think will end. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that they were officially dating. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just tired. It's strange how betrayal can burn so hot at first, then cool into numbness. Looking back, I learned that boundaries matter, and that people who truly respect you don't cross them. It hurt, but it also forced me to build new friendships that are healthier, more balanced. When it was over, I realized losing them both at once was painful, but it cleared space for people who actually valued me. Sometimes endings are brutal, but they make room for better beginnings. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. He ruined my birthday. Birthdays were always a big deal to me, not because I needed a party or tons of gifts, but because it felt like the one day people showed up for you. Last year, I had it all planned out, a small dinner with friends, some drinks, nothing extravagant. My boyfriend at the time, Dylan, promised me he'd handle everything. "Don't worry," he said with that confident grin. "This year's going to be special." I believed him. I trusted him. But the day arrived, and things started unraveling almost immediately. He hadn't booked the restaurant like he said he would. Instead, he called me in a panic that morning asking if I had any ideas. I ended up making reservations myself while still trying to act excited. By the time dinner rolled around, only half of my friends showed up. Dylan had forgotten to actually send invites to the rest. He sat at the table like it was no big deal, scrolling on his phone while I tried to keep the mood alive. I laughed, I smiled, but inside I was crushed. Every year I had gone out of my way to make his birthdays feel meaningful. And here I was, eating cake someone else bought last minute, watching him scroll TikTok while my best friend tried to cheer me up. The breaking point came when the check arrived. Dylan glanced at it, then casually pushed it toward me. "You got this, right?" he said, not even looking me in the eye. My friend stared, wide-eyed, waiting for him to laugh and say he was joking. But he wasn't. I ended up paying for my own birthday dinner while he mumbled something about being short on cash. Later, I found out he had spent the week buying himself a new gaming console. When we got back to my place, I thought maybe he'd at least try to salvage the night, say something kind, make me feel seen. Instead, he grabbed a controller, fired up his new console, and said, "Well, happy birthday, babe." That was it. No card, no gift, no effort. Just him sinking into the couch while I sat there wondering how I'd convinced myself this relationship was love. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the problem wasn't just the birthday. It was every little moment where I had excused his selfishness, every time I told myself, "He'll do better next time." My birthday was just the spotlight that made me finally see the truth. The next morning, I ended things. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no tears. Just a quiet, steady voice saying, "I can't do this anymore." Dylan looked surprised, like he genuinely hadn't realized how badly he'd failed me. But that's the thing, people like him never realize. They take until there's nothing left to give, and then act shocked when you walk away. In the weeks that followed, I leaned on my friends. They admitted they'd never liked Dylan, that they always thought I deserved better. At first, I was embarrassed that it had taken me so long to see it. But then I realized, sometimes you need that one final push, that one awful night, to wake you up. Looking back, my ruined birthday was the best gift he could have given me. It freed me from wasting another year of my life on someone who never cared. Now birthdays feel lighter, because they're mine again. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. My neighbor tried to control my yard. When I bought my house, I thought the hardest part would be the mortgage. I never imagined the real nightmare would live next door. My neighbor, Mrs. Jennings, was the kind of person who acted like the entire street belonged to her. At first, it was little comments. "Oh, you should trim that tree back." Or, "That mailbox color doesn't really match the neighborhood." I brushed them off, thinking she was just being friendly, maybe overly chatty. But then the notes started showing up. Folded pieces of paper tucked under my doormat. "Your lawn is too long. Those flowers don't fit the aesthetic of the block. Please repaint your fence a neutral color." At first I laughed. Who even cares about fence color? But the laughter didn't last. One Saturday morning, I caught her on my property. She had her clippers in hand, trimming the rose bushes I had planted myself. When I walked outside, she jumped like a kid caught stealing cookies. "They were sticking out onto the sidewalk," she snapped. But they weren't. They were fine. That's when it hit me, she didn't just want things tidy. She wanted control. I tried being polite. I explained that I liked my yard the way it was, and that I'd appreciate her staying off my property. She smiled, nodded, and the very next week I found her again, this time pulling up the wildflowers I had planted by the fence. She said they looked messy. I told her if she touched my plants again, I'd call the police. The feud escalated quickly. She started filing complaints with the homeowners association, even though we didn't have one. She left passive-aggressive flyers on my porch about community standards. And one night, I heard noises outside. When I flipped on the porch light, I saw her with a bucket of paint, halfway through splashing it on my fence. That was the last straw. I took photos, filed a police report, and had a lawyer send her a cease and desist letter. She tried to play the victim, telling other neighbors I was bullying her. But the evidence spoke louder than her gossip. Eventually, she backed off. I don't know if it was the legal threat or the cold shoulders from the rest of the block, but she stopped meddling. My yard isn't perfect. It's not supposed to be. It's mine. Every flower, every patch of grass, even the slightly crooked mailbox, that's my choice. I still catch her glaring from her porch sometimes, but she stays on her side now. And honestly, that's enough for me. When it was all said and done, I realized that standing your ground doesn't always mean fighting. It just means refusing to let someone else write your story. My yard may be small, but it's mine, and that's worth protecting. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She lied about being sick. I thought my girlfriend, Emily, was one of the most honest people I knew. She had this soft voice, this way of making you believe she'd never hurt a soul. So when she started saying she wasn't feeling well, constant headaches, stomach issues, I didn't hesitate. I drove her to appointments, sat in waiting rooms, picked up her meds, even stayed home from work when she said she needed company. At first, my friends admired my dedication. "You're a good guy," they'd tell me. But after a few months, I started noticing little cracks in the story. She'd tell me she was too sick to leave bed, but I'd see her posting photos out with friends. She'd claim she needed rest, but later admit she'd gone shopping all afternoon. When I asked about it, she always had an excuse. "Oh, I felt better for a few hours." Or, "I didn't want to worry you." I wanted to believe her. I told myself maybe the illness was unpredictable, maybe she was just embarrassed. But then one day, I overheard her laughing on the phone with her sister, saying, "Yeah, I just told him I was sick again. Works every time." My chest went cold. The truth spilled out slowly. Emily wasn't sick. Not even close. She admitted she'd been exaggerating, making up symptoms, because she wanted attention and didn't want to deal with things like chores or obligations. She framed it as if it were harmless. "It's not like I did it to hurt you," she said. But the betrayal was sharp. I had reorganized my entire life around her illness. I had turned down work trips, spent money I didn't have, lost sleep worrying about her. What broke me was realizing she had let me believe I was her caretaker, her support, while she was laughing behind my back. It wasn't just about lying, it was about manipulating the person who trusted her most. I walked out that night. No big fight, no dramatic ending. Just the quiet sound of me gathering my things while she tried to backpedal. "Wait, I'll stop, I promise," she said, as if promises meant anything anymore. In the weeks after, I felt like a fool. Every memory replayed differently. The sick days, that were actually shopping trips, the tears she faked to keep me from leaving, the pity she soaked up from everyone around us. It made me question my judgment. How could I have been so blind? But with time, I realized that compassion isn't a weakness. Wanting to care for someone isn't foolish, it's human. The fault wasn't mine for believing, it was hers for abusing that belief. What I learned was that empathy is valuable, but only if you give it to people who deserve it. I'd rather risk caring too much than become someone too cold to care at all. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. He took the kids. Divorce is never easy, but I thought ours would at least be civil. My ex-husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 8 years and had 2 kids together, Ethan, 6, and Lily, 4. When things fell apart, I told myself we'd find a way to co-parent respectfully. That was the only thing I asked for, respect. For the kids' sake. At first, it seemed possible. We worked out a schedule, dividing weekends and weekdays. I let him have extra time when he asked, never wanting my children to feel like they were bargaining chips. But then one weekend, he didn't bring them back. I waited by the window, checking the driveway every 10 minutes. Finally, I called him. He answered with a casual, "Yeah, they're staying with me now." My heart stopped. What do you mean? It's my week. He sighed like I was being dramatic. They're better off with me. You're too emotional. They don't need that instability. Instability. That word cut deep. I had been the one cooking their meals, reading them bedtime stories, getting them to school on time while he worked late nights and slept in on weekends. And suddenly, in his mind, I wasn't fit to be their mother. I tried to stay calm, asking when I could come get them. His voice hardened. You're not getting them back. Not until we settle this properly. That night I barely slept. The house was too quiet, their toys scattered across the living room like ghosts of a life that had been ripped away. Every sound felt wrong. The silence of their empty rooms was unbearable. And I realized, with icy dread, that this wasn't just about custody. This was about power. Daniel wanted control, and he was willing to use the children to get it. The next morning, I drove straight to his apartment. My hands shook the entire way, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. When I got there, Ethan and Lily's shoes were lined up neatly outside the door. My heart ached seeing them. It was proof they were just on the other side of that wall, so close, yet completely out of reach. I knocked, then pounded, calling Daniel's name. Eventually he opened the door, blocking the entrance with his body. The kids peeked around his legs, their eyes wide and confused. Go back inside, he told them, his voice gentle with them but hard with me. When I tried to step forward, he stopped me. You're not taking them. Daniel, this isn't your decision, I said, my voice cracking. We had an agreement. He smirked like he was the one in control now. Agreements change. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll hear from them soon. I left before I completely broke down in front of the kids. In the car, I sobbed until my throat hurt. Every instinct screamed at me to go back, to take them, to refuse to leave without them. But I knew if I lost my temper, it would only give him more ammunition. That night, I called my own lawyer. She told me custody battles could drag on for months, sometimes years. The thought of missing birthdays, bedtime stories, scraped knees, it shattered me. But I refused to let him rewrite reality. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't unfit. I was their mother, and I wasn't going to let him erase me from their lives. So I began documenting everything, every text, every call, every missed handoff. If he wanted a battle, I'd give him one, but I'd do it the right way. For Ethan and Lily. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Daniel kept the kids longer than agreed, twisted stories to make me look reckless, even told the court I had emotional issues. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to him paint me as someone I barely recognized, was a kind of betrayal I'll never forget. But then something unexpected happened. Ethan's teacher submitted a statement. She wrote about how I always attended conferences, how I packed healthy lunches, how I was the one she could count on to respond quickly to concerns. Then Lily's daycare teacher added her voice, describing how I picked her up every day with a smile, how I never missed a payment, how Lily always talked about Mommy reading me stories. Piece by piece, the truth began to outweigh his lies. When the judge finally ruled, it was clear, shared custody, with primary residence granted to me. Daniel's face fell when he heard it, but I didn't gloat. I just felt relief, a tidal wave of it. When Ethan and Lily came home that night, they ran through the door and clung to me like they'd never let go. I held them until my arms ached, whispering over and over, "I've got you. I'll always have you." Looking back, I realized Daniel didn't just try to take the kids, he tried to take my identity as their mother. But the truth shone through. I fought, I endured, and I'd proved that love, not manipulation, is what defines a parent. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She tried to ruin my wedding. Weddings are supposed to be joyful, but mine felt like a battlefield the moment my maid of honor, Sarah, decided it wasn't about me, it was about her. We had been friends since high school, inseparable through thick and thin. That's why I chose her to stand beside me. I thought she'd be my rock. Instead, she nearly turned the happiest day of my life into a nightmare. It started small. She complained about the bridesmaid dresses, insisting the color made her look washed out. She argued about the hairstyle, the shoes, even the bouquet. I thought it was just nerves, maybe stress. I kept brushing it off because I wanted peace. But then she began making comments to others, saying things like, "Honestly, I should have been the one getting married first." And, "Do you really think they're going to last?" When I confronted her, she laughed. "I'm just joking. Don't be so sensitive." But the jokes kept coming. On my bachelorette night, she deliberately invited her ex, the one who had cheated on her, just to cause drama. I spent most of the night comforting her instead of celebrating my own engagement. By the time the rehearsal dinner rolled around, I was on edge. My family noticed. My fiancé noticed. But I still tried to hold it together. This was my wedding, and I wasn't going to let petty drama ruin it. At least, that's what I thought, until the wedding day itself, when Sarah made her final move. The morning of my wedding, Sarah showed up late, hungover, and carrying a dress that wasn't the one we'd agreed on. She had chosen a gown almost identical to mine, white, lace, long flowing skirt. The only difference was that hers was cut lower, flashier, designed to draw eyes. When I saw her, I froze. "What is that?" I whispered, horrified. "It's my dress," she said casually, as if nothing was wrong. "You can't tell me what to wear." The bridesmaids pulled me aside, whispering about how inappropriate it was. But I was too stunned to fight. I didn't want to start a screaming match hours before walking down the aisle. So I bit my tongue, praying she'd come to her senses. She didn't. During the ceremony, she strutted down the aisle like it was her show. Guests whispered. My grandmother leaned over and asked if Sarah had misunderstood her role. I clenched my jaw, focusing on my fiancé, refusing to let her steal my moment. But then, during the reception, Sarah crossed a line I'll never forget. She took the microphone during the speeches and started rambling about how she never thought he'd actually choose her, nodding toward me with a drunken laugh. Gasps rippled across the room. I wanted to crawl under the table. My fiancé grabbed my hand tightly, steadying me. That night, instead of basking in joy, I sat in my hotel room in tears, my dress wrinkled around me, wondering how someone I'd trusted for years could sabotage me on purpose. The fallout was brutal. Sarah tried to defend herself, saying it was just a joke, and that people were overreacting. But the damage was done. My family was furious. My husband wanted nothing more to do with her. And me? I felt like I'd been mourning the loss of a friend right in the middle of what should have been the happiest moment of my life. In the days that followed, I cut off contact. There were no long explanations, no drawn-out fights. Just silence. I deleted her number, blocked her on social media, and refused to engage when she tried to reach out. It hurt, but I knew if I let her back in, she'd only find another way to drag me down. Months later, when I looked back at my wedding photos, I realized something important. Yes, Sarah's behavior had cast a shadow, but it hadn't stolen the light completely. There were still pictures of me and my husband laughing, dancing, surrounded by people who loved us. That's what mattered. When it was over, I learned that some friendships expire the moment you stop allowing disrespect. My wedding wasn't perfect, but it was still mine, and no one, not even Sarah, could take away the vows we spoke that day. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. He cheated with my sister. Betrayal is one thing when it comes from a partner. It's another level entirely when it comes from your own family. I thought my boyfriend, Alex, was the love of my life. We had been together for 3 years, built plans for the future, even talked about moving in together. And my sister, Hannah? She was my confidant, the one I stayed up late talking to, the one I trusted with everything. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed the signs. Alex always seemed a little too eager when Hannah was around. He laughed harder at her jokes, lingered in conversation with her, found excuses to help her with things. But I brushed it off. Why wouldn't my boyfriend and my sister get along? Isn't that supposed to be a good thing? The truth slammed into me one evening when I left work early. I walked into my apartment, expecting to find Alex on the couch with his laptop. Instead, I found him and Hannah in the kitchen, kissing like they'd been doing it for a while. My body went cold. The sound of my keys hitting the floor was what made them notice me. Hannah's face drained of color. Alex stammered my name, but I couldn't even process words. I just stood there, heart breaking in slow motion. I walked out before either of them could say a thing. My phone buzzed with messages that night, apologies, excuses, promises that it wasn't what it looked like. But it was exactly what it looked like. And the worst part was realizing that both of them, the two people I trusted most, had conspired to betray me. In the days that followed, I ignored every call. My parents eventually found out, and the family split into camps. Some said Hannah had made a mistake, that I should forgive her because family is forever. Others were disgusted, siding with me completely. As for Alex, he showed up at my door with flowers, begging for another chance. I laughed in his face. The sheer audacity of him standing there, holding roses like that would erase the image burned into my mind, was almost surreal. Hannah, though, that hurt more. She showed up crying, insisting it had only happened once, that she didn't mean for it to go that far. I asked her a simple question. If I hadn't walked in, would it have kept happening? She couldn't answer. And in that silence I knew the truth. I cut them both off. Holidays became awkward. My parents tried to play mediator, but I refused to sit at the same table as Hannah. The wound was too raw, the betrayal too deep. Alex faded out of my life completely, but Hannah, her absence was louder. I missed my sister, but I couldn't look at her without remembering that kiss. At night, I replayed it over and over. The sound of their laughter cut short, the way they froze when they saw me. It haunted me in ways I didn't expect. It wasn't just about losing a boyfriend. It was about losing the bond one thought was unshakable. Months passed. Slowly, the pain dulled, but the scar remained. I built a new life for myself, pouring energy into friendships and hobbies that reminded me I was more than what they had taken from me. Therapy helped too. It gave me words for the storm I'd been carrying, and taught me that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Eventually, Hannah reached out again. She sent a long letter, handwritten, filled with regret. She claimed she'd been insecure, jealous of me, and made choices that spiraled into something she couldn't undo. I read it, but I didn't respond. Because forgiveness, I realized, wasn't something owed. It was something earned. And she hadn't earned it. Alex, on the other hand, moved away. Last I heard, he was dating someone new. I felt nothing when I heard that. No anger, no longing, just emptiness, like he was a stranger I'd once known. Looking back, I realized that betrayal doesn't define you. It reveals the strength you didn't know you had. Losing them hurt, but it made space for me to stand taller, clearer about what I deserved. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. My boss tried to ruin my career. I used to think hard work spoke for itself. Show up on time, put in the effort, and people will notice. That's what I believed, until I met my boss, Mr. Carter. At first, he seemed supportive. He praised my reports, said I had potential, even hinted at a promotion down the line. But behind that smile, he was sharpening knives I didn't see coming. It started with small things. He'd take credit for my ideas in meetings, rephrasing them as if they had sprung fully formed from his mouth. He'd forget to CC me on important emails, then act surprised when I didn't follow through. I chalked it up to oversight, maybe stress on his part. But then came the performance reviews. He sat across from me, pen tapping on the desk, and told me I lacked initiative. My jaw almost hit the floor. I had been running projects practically solo, staying late, fixing mistakes that weren't even mine. I reminded him of specific cases, but he waved them off. You need to be more proactive, he said, with that same smile that no longer felt friendly. I realized then that this wasn't incompetence, it was sabotage. And it wasn't just me. Other coworkers whispered about similar experiences. We were being set up piece by piece, while he polished his own reputation with upper management. The breaking point came when he presented my entire quarterly proposal as his own, word for word. I sat in that conference room, my name stripped off slides I had spent weeks preparing, while executives nodded in approval at his brilliant work. My stomach churned, but my voice stayed quiet. Speaking up felt dangerous. But deep down, I knew staying silent would cost me more than my pride. It could cost me my career. After that meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment I sat frozen, letting my work be stolen in front of me. My friends urged me to quit, but I couldn't. Bills don't stop just because your boss is a snake. So instead, I started documenting everything. Every email, every draft, every timestamp of my work. I built a folder so thick it could choke a filing cabinet. The next big project was my chance. Carter had been bragging to management that he had a new strategy, ready to pitch. But what he didn't know was that I had quietly shared my drafts with a senior director weeks earlier, asking for feedback and timestamps on the files. When Carter presented his strategy, the director raised an eyebrow. "Funny," he said. "This looks awfully similar to something my name showed me." Carter stammered, trying to pivot, but the damage was done. The director asked me directly to explain my plan. For the first time, I got to speak while Carter sat red-faced at the end of the table. The fallout was immediate. Upper management began scrutinizing his projects, and the cracks showed quickly. Deadlines he had claimed to meet weren't met. Ideas he supposedly created couldn't be backed up. And the whispers among staff turned into formal complaints. I wasn't the only one keeping receipts. Within months, Carter was quietly transitioned out. That was the corporate term they used, but we all knew what it meant. I got a promotion, not out of pity, but because my work had finally spoken for itself, unfiltered by his sabotage. The victory felt sweet, but it also left me wary. For months I had doubted myself, questioned whether I was really as capable as I thought. That's the poison of people like Carter. They twist reality until you can't trust your own reflection. It took everything in me to push back, to stand up for what I knew was true. When I finally settled into my new role, I promised myself I'd never treat people the way he treated me. Leadership isn't about control or credit, it's about lifting people up, giving them the space to shine. I made sure my team knew I saw their work, that I'd never let someone else steal it. Carter? Last I heard, he tried to land another management job, but word of mouth follows you faster than a resume. People talk. Reputations stick. And his was tarnished beyond repair. When it was all said and done, I learned that silence can be as dangerous as lies. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, but if you don't, someone else will gladly write your story for you. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She pretended to be my friend. Friendship, to me, always meant loyalty. So when I met Jessica at work, I thought I'd finally found someone who understood that. She was funny, supportive, the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and texted to check in when you had a bad day. Within months, we were inseparable. Lunch breaks together, weekend plans, long calls about everything from dating drama to family problems. She felt more like a sister than a co-worker. But slowly, cracks started to show. Jessica had a way of weaving herself into every part of my life, and not always in a good way. She'd subtly put me down in front of others, little comments like, "Oh, don't ask her, she's always late," or, "Yeah, she means well, but she's kind of sensitive." I laughed it off, thinking she was just teasing. Then, one afternoon, I overheard her talking in the break room with another colleague. My name came up. "She's so naive," Jessica said, laughing. "She'll tell you anything if you just act like you care." My stomach dropped. I stood frozen outside the door, listening to my best friend dissect my life like gossip for her entertainment. I confronted her later, but she brushed it off. "Oh my God, you're overreacting. I was just joking." That word again, joking. It was the same excuse people always use when they get caught being cruel. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a joke. She thrived on making me small so she could feel big. Still, I gave her another chance. That was my mistake. It got worse. Jessica started cozying up to my boss, repeating things I'd told her in confidence. I'd vent about stress, and suddenly he'd be asking if I was feeling overwhelmed, or capable of handling deadlines. My private worries had become ammunition, delivered by someone I thought was my ally. The final straw came at a party one weekend. A group of us were playing a silly game where you share secrets, or embarrassing stories. I kept mine lighthearted, but when it was Jessica's turn, she smirked and said, "Oh, I'll share one of her secrets instead." And then she spilled something deeply personal I had only told her, about a family issue that had taken me years to even say out loud. Everyone laughed awkwardly, not realizing the depth of what she'd exposed. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I left in tears, my phone buzzing with her messages. "Relax, it was funny. Don't be so sensitive." That night, I finally saw her for what she was. She wasn't a friend. She was a parasite, feeding on the intimacy I gave her and twisting it into something ugly. The next morning, I cut her off. No explanation, no dramatic fight. Just silence. I blocked her on everything and walked into work on Monday with my head held high, even though my heart was still heavy. At first it hurt. I missed the constant texts, the inside jokes, the comfort of having someone to share every little thought with. But over time, I realized I wasn't missing her. I was missing the idea of what I thought she was. Jessica had never been the friend I believed in. She had only played the role long enough to get what she wanted. Colleagues started to notice the change. Without her shadow, I spoke up more in meetings. I laughed more freely at lunch. And slowly, people gravitated toward me for me, not through her filter. Months later, I saw Jessica at a networking event. She tried to smile, tried to act like nothing had happened, but I just walked past her. There was no anger left, just clarity. Some people pretend to be your friend, but true friends don't make you question your worth. When it was all said and done, I learned that friendship isn't about who's around during the fun times, it's about who protects your heart when it's vulnerable. Jessica failed that test, and I finally stopped letting her grade me. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. He lied about his past. When I met Ryan, he seemed almost too good to be true. He was charming, attentive, the kind of guy who opened doors and remembered the little details about my day. We met through friends, and from the start, he carried himself like someone dependable, trustworthy. He told me he worked in finance, had just moved back to the city after years away, and wanted to settle down. Everything about him screamed stability. But then small inconsistencies started creeping in. He'd mention living abroad for 5 years, but later slip and say something about spending holidays at home with family. He said he didn't drink, yet old photos on social media showed him at bars, glass in hand. When I asked, he laughed it off, saying, "Oh, that was just once or twice." The first real red flag came when I bumped into an old acquaintance at a coffee shop. She saw Ryan's picture on my phone and froze. "You're dating him?" she asked carefully. My stomach dropped. She told me she knew Ryan years ago, not as some polished finance guy, but as someone who had been fired from multiple jobs for dishonesty. I didn't want to believe it. That night, I asked him directly, "Have you ever been fired?" He looked me straight in the eye and said no. That was the moment the seed of doubt was planted. Over the next few weeks, I started digging. Not obsessively, just enough to see if things lined up. They didn't. His supposed alma mater had no record of him graduating. The company he claimed to work at had no employee by his name. Piece by piece, the picture I'd been given unraveled, and underneath was a stranger I didn't recognize. The confrontation was inevitable. I sat Ryan down and laid out everything I'd found. At first, he tried to laugh it off, saying I was being paranoid. But when I pressed, his mask cracked. He admitted he'd lied, about the degree, about his job, even about where he had lived. His explanation? He didn't think I'd like the truth. The real story spilled out. He hadn't worked in finance. He had bounced between retail jobs, never lasting more than a year. The years abroad, he talked about, were actually years spent moving between small towns, trying to outrun debts and a bad reputation. He hadn't graduated from university at all. He had dropped out after his first semester. I sat there in silence, anger and heartbreak mixing in my chest. "Why not just tell me the truth?" I asked. His answer was simple, almost chilling in its selfishness. "Because I wanted you to see me as someone better." The irony was, I didn't care about the degree or the job title. What I cared about was honesty. And that was the one thing he couldn't give me. In the days that followed, Ryan tried to spin it. He sent long texts about how his lies weren't hurting anyone, that he was still the same man I cared about. But the thing was, he wasn't. The man I cared about didn't exist. He was a character Ryan had invented, a mask he wore until it slipped. Leaving him wasn't easy. Part of me still wanted to believe in the version of Ryan he had created, the safe and reliable man who seemed so perfect at the beginning. But once the mask comes off, you can't put it back on. Every word felt tainted, every promise hollow. I walked away quietly, blocking his number after one final message. "I loved who I thought you were. But that person never existed." For a while, I blamed myself. How had I not seen it sooner? How could I fall for such an elaborate performance? But with time, I realized people like Ryan thrive on trust. They build illusions so carefully that you want to believe them. And that isn't a weakness. It's proof of your own capacity for hope. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that Ryan was still spinning the same lies, only with someone new. It hurt, but it also made me grateful I had escaped before the web grew tighter. Looking back, I learned that truth doesn't need to be polished or perfect, it just needs to be real. Lies, no matter how pretty, always collapse under their own weight. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She used me for money. When I first started dating Melissa, she made me feel like the most important person in the world. She'd hold my hand in public, send me sweet good morning texts, and talk about a future together. It felt like love, or at least what I thought love should feel like. But looking back, the red flags were there from the beginning. I just didn't want to see them. She never reached for the check. Not once. At first, I didn't mind. I liked treating her, liked seeing her smile when I surprised her with dinner or a small gift. But then the requests started. "Can you cover my phone bill? I'm short this month. I really need new tires. Could you help me out?" Each time, it was framed as temporary, just until she got back on her feet. Months passed, and the amounts grew. Suddenly, I wasn't just paying for meals. I was covering rent, groceries, even loaning her money. For emergencies. Yet somehow, I never saw any sign of her getting back on her feet. She always had her nails done, new clothes in her closet, the latest phone upgrade. When I gently asked about it, she'd pout and say, "Don't you want me to look nice for you?" My friends started warning me. They said Melissa was using me, that she didn't love me, she loved what I gave her. I defended her, told them they didn't understand. But deep down, their words stuck. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was being drained, piece by piece, under the guise of love. The moment of truth came one afternoon when I stopped by her place unannounced. She wasn't home, but her laptop sat open on the counter. Curiosity got the better of me. One message thread froze me in place. It was with another guy. She was asking him for money too. My stomach twisted as I scrolled. Message after message, Melissa used the same lines on him that she'd used on me. The same stories about bills, car trouble. Emergencies. She wasn't just leaning on me, she was running a whole rotation of people willing to pay for her lifestyle. When she came home, I was still sitting there, laptop closed but my face pale. "What's wrong?" she asked, pretending innocence. I told her I knew. At first, she denied it, swearing I misunderstood. But when I pressed, the mask cracked. "So what if I get help from more than one person?" she snapped. "It's not like you couldn't afford it." The casual cruelty in her voice cut deeper than the betrayal. She didn't even see it as wrong. To her, I wasn't a boyfriend. I was a bank account with feelings attached. I walked out that night. She called, texted, begged me to come back, though most of her pleas included lines like, "I don't know how I'll pay rent without you." There it was, clear as day. It was never about me. It was always about what I could provide. For weeks after, I felt empty. Angry at her, yes, but mostly angry at myself for letting it happen. How had I confused manipulation for love? How had I ignored every warning sign just because I didn't want to be alone? With time, I began to see it differently. Melissa hadn't fooled me because I was weak, she had fooled me because I was hopeful. I wanted so badly to believe in her that I silenced my own instincts. That wasn't love. That was denial. I paid off the last of my credit card bills months later, the ones I'd racked up trying to keep both of us afloat. Every swipe, every dollar, felt like another reminder of how far I'd fallen for her illusion. But paying them off also felt like freedom, like closing a chapter one never wanted to reread. Melissa, I later heard, moved on to someone else. And part of me pitied him, knowing what was coming. But mostly, I felt relief. Relief that I had finally chosen myself over someone who never would have chosen me. What I learned was simple but harsh: real love doesn't drain you, it fills you. Melissa never filled me with anything but debt and doubt, and walking away was the best investment I've ever made. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. He tried to control everything. When I started dating Mark, I thought his attention to detail was sweet. He'd notice if I wore a new sweater, remember my coffee order, remind me to grab my umbrella if it looked like rain. It felt caring, thoughtful. But over time, that attentiveness sharpened into something else, something suffocating. It began with little comments. "You should wear your hair down, it looks better that way. Don't post that photo, it makes you look unserious. Maybe skip hanging out with those friends, they don't really get you." I brushed it off as him being opinionated, but slowly, I noticed my choices shrinking. Every decision seemed to pass through the filter of what Mark would approve of. Then it escalated. He wanted access to my phone. To build trust. He insisted on knowing where I was at all times, texting constantly if I didn't reply within minutes. When I said I needed space, he accused me of hiding something. When I said no to plans, he sulked until I gave in. My life started feeling like a maze built around his moods. The breaking point came when he showed up at my job unannounced, demanding to know why I hadn't answered his calls. I had been in a meeting. My coworkers watched as he berated me in the lobby, his voice sharp, eyes blazing. I laughed it off later, embarrassed, but inside I felt trapped. This wasn't love, it was control dressed up as concern. That night, staring at my ceiling, I realized I had two choices: keep shrinking until there was nothing left of me, or finally push back. The next day, I told Mark I needed boundaries. His reaction was explosive. "Boundaries? In a relationship, there are no boundaries. We're supposed to share everything." He paced my apartment like a storm, throwing his hands up, accusing me of being distant, ungrateful, even disloyal. I stood my ground, my voice shaking but steady. "Love isn't control, Mark. If you can't respect my space, then this isn't working." He tried to laugh it off, then switched to begging, then finally anger again. The cycle was dizzying. But I didn't budge. For the first time, I refused to bend. Over the next week, his behavior only confirmed what I already knew. He flooded my phone with messages, hundreds in a single day. He showed up outside my building, waiting in his car. He even tried to contact my friends, asking them to talk sense into me. It was exhausting, terrifying, and eye-opening. I got advice from a friend who had been through something similar: document everything. I started saving messages, taking photos when he appeared at my work. Eventually, I had enough evidence to block him completely, with the reassurance that if he crossed the line again, I could involve the police. The silence that followed felt like oxygen. For the first time in months, I breathed without permission. Recovery wasn't instant. For weeks, I'd catch myself checking my phone, half expecting another barrage of messages. Sometimes I'd hear a car idling outside and my chest would tighten. But slowly the fear faded, replaced by something stronger: clarity. I realized how small I had allowed myself to become. How every decision, every word, had been filtered through his approval. And once I saw it, I promised myself I'd never let anyone shrink me like that again. Mark eventually gave up. Or maybe he found someone else to control. I'll never know. What I do know is that I walked away stronger than I ever thought I could. Looking back, I learned that real love doesn't cage you, it frees you. Anyone who demands control in the name of love is only showing their fear, not their heart. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She turned everyone against me. When I first moved into my apartment building, I thought I'd lucked out. The neighbors seemed friendly, the community close-knit, and one person in particular, Leah, went out of her way to welcome me. She brought over baked cookies, invited me to group events, and even helped me carry groceries once. I thought, finally, a friend in the building. But over time, I noticed something odd. People who used to smile at me in the hallway stopped making eye contact. Invitations to casual get-togethers dried up. When I walked into the laundry room, conversations would pause until I left. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. Something had shifted. I eventually found out why. A coworker who also lived in the building pulled me aside. "Hey," she whispered. "I don't know if you know this, but Leah's been saying things about you." My stomach dropped. She explained that Leah had been spreading rumors, that I was messy, that I never paid my share for group events, even that I'd hit on someone's boyfriend. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. People believed her. I felt betrayed and confused. Leah, the same person who smiled in my face, was quietly dismantling my reputation behind my back. I wanted to confront her immediately, but fear held me back. If she had already turned everyone against me, what chance did I have of defending myself? Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on Leah's door, my heart pounding. She opened with her usual bright smile, as if nothing was wrong. "Hey, what's up?" she asked sweetly. I cut straight to the point. "Why are you telling people lies about me?" Her face barely flickered. Then she laughed softly. "Oh, come on. People talk. Don't take it so seriously." But I did take it seriously. My friendships had evaporated, my sense of community shattered, all because she decided to poison the well. When I pressed her further, she shrugged. "Maybe I just don't like competition." That one line told me everything. Leah thrived on control, on being the center of attention. And when I showed up, friendly and well-liked, she saw me as a threat. Instead of building me up, she tore me down to secure her spot. I realized I couldn't win her game by playing it. So instead, I quietly started rebuilding. I invited neighbors for coffee, one-on-one, and slowly explained the truth, not in a defensive, desperate way, but calmly, with evidence when I had it. I showed screenshots, receipts, little pieces of proof that contradicted Leah's stories. Bit by bit, people began to see her differently. It didn't happen overnight, but eventually the tide turned. Neighbors who had avoided me started warming up again, apologizing for believing the worst. Leah's influence weakened, her charm wearing thin once people realized how easily she lied. The final blow came when someone caught her badmouthing another neighbor in the same way she had done to me. The pattern was clear. It was never about me specifically. It was about control, about keeping everyone orbiting around her. Now, months later, Leah mostly keeps to herself. She still lives in the building, but the power she once had is gone. And me? I've learned that reputation is fragile, but truth has a way of shining through eventually. When it was over, I realized Leah hadn't truly taken anything from me. She had only delayed what I would eventually build, real, solid friendships based on trust. And that, in the end, was stronger than any rumor. And that's the end of this story, and the last one for tonight. Thanks for spending your time here tonight and listening to these Reddit stories. I hope they helped you relax and gave you a moment to slow down. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps me keep making more of these for you. Wishing you a peaceful night, and I'll see you in the next one.